our guest tonight is WWE Hall of Famer and Mr. Wrestlemania, Shawn Michaels. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well. I appreciate y'all having me.
No problem, no problem. Listen, your new book, Wrestling for My Life, The Legend, the Reality, and the Faith of a WWE Superstars, hit the shelves this week. I had the pleasure of reading the book already and discovered the overarching theme is your faith and how it turned around your life. What made you feel like it was the right time to publish this book, and what are you trying to accomplish by sharing your stories of faith?
Well, one, it's certainly a book that I've wanted to do for quite some time, but it's very hard to do that when you're in the throes of a WWE career. It's a wonderful line of work, but it keeps you very busy and obviously sort of takes the forefront and the spotlight sort of everything that you do. But in the truest sense, my faith and my family have been the biggest and most impactful parts of my life, and they always have a tendency to take the back seat because even though the WWE is so big and so grandiose, it's really, especially since 2002, it was just my job, and rarely does someone's job sort of take the forefront of everything they do in their life, and so I wanted to do a book that certainly gave them what I felt was the just due for the wonderful and positive influence and impact that they've had on my life, and so that's the reason for doing it. And as far as what I'm hoping to accomplish, gosh, I don't know. I'm just a guy trying to tell a story. If certainly from a faith perspective, and in the church, we believe that giving one's testimony is one. It's a way of glorifying the Lord and what He's done in your life. But also, it might make it easier for other folks to be honest or be open or come to a place or a crossroads to where they might not have all the answers and are searching, and giving them a sort of a way and an outlook on what helped us, and perhaps giving them an opportunity to reckon themselves with Almighty God through Jesus Christ and the impact that can have on your life.
Mike Chiari?
Part of your book focuses on the second half of your WWE career, which, of course, kicked off with the Unsanctioned street fight at Summerslam 2002 against Triple H. How was that decision to come back after so much time away from the ring ultimately made in terms of who was involved in it? And also, how did you know that the time was right and that you were ready for it?
Okay, well, I'll answer the first part first. I guess is the how the process sort of went was they had, I had gotten saved and had called Vince and said, hey, regarding a previous offer many months before that to come back, and I turned them down because something was going on in my life and I didn't want to miss it. And so after I got saved, I called him and said, oh my goodness, this is what it is. It's Jesus, and He saved me, and my life is wonderful now. And if you still want me to come back, I'd love to. And at that time, he said, well, that window's sort of closed, but we'll certainly keep the door open if something comes up. And then a few more months down the road, got the call to, hey, I'd like to bring you back as just an on-air character. And of course, I agreed to that, and we did the short NWO stint. And in that time, if I recall correctly, I think it was Nash that was going to be going to the next pay-per-view, I think, with Hunter. And they were slowly sort of building at least a match between Hunter and Kev. And that's when he blew his quad out. And just, through, honestly, leaving the next day, I was just thinking about a lot of stuff. I was on the plane reading the book of Joshua and just thoughts came into my head about possibly returning, and the words "be strong and courageous" at the beginning of Joshua just sort of kept jumping off the page at me, and I thought, who knows, maybe I can come back and do this. And so I made a call to Vince and threw out an idea that had involved just wrestling him, actually, more in a street fight. And again, just something that was more, the storyline was, him sort of pushing and forcing Kevin to be in a match when he knew he wasn't healthy, and yada, yada, yada. He ended up getting hurt, and I was, going to, sort of defend the honor of wrestlers being pushed by, too hard by Vince. And anyway, culminating in a storyline and just a throwaway match between Vince and myself. And he said, well, gosh, are you ready? And I said, I just believe I can do it. And anyway, he said, let me think about it. And then he called me back 2 weeks later, and he said, look, if you can do that with me, couldn't you have a match with Hunter? I mean, he's a heck of a lot better than I am. And of course, I said, well, of course. I just didn't, Hunter was the main guy at the time, and I wasn't looking to come back in some kind of big, fashion. I was just looking to be like a, sort of plus a couple other exciting matches and something a little lower on the card that, sort of all the focus wouldn't be there. And again, if you are going to stumble and fall, that it's done a little lower on the card, without quite the spotlight. But anywho, the opportunity was there to do it with Hunter, and I thought, well, heck yes, that'll be fantastic. And then it sort of turned into being a much bigger, obviously promoted match than originally I had anticipated, but was obviously thrilled about that. And then, as far as knowing if I could come back, I didn't. That was the $1 million question, which was those are all great ideas, but you still got to deliver, and haven't been in the ring in 4.5 years or whatever it was, and how's that going to be? And clearly didn't know, but that soon after my salvation and things of that nature, and just everything going well, I was pretty confident that it was either going to be there or it wasn't, and it was sort of a sink or swim moment. And thankfully, everything went well when we got out there.
Brandon Galvin?
Shawn, I was there at Nassau Coliseum for your return match against Triple H, which is one of my all-time favorite matches. And I was wondering if you recall what the atmosphere was like backstage for your return.
As best I recall, again, I had my wife and child there, and it was pretty positive. Again, as best I can recall, it was a number of us were wondering clearly how it would go, and it was going to be a big finger in the wind moment to see just how well this was going to be, or how much of a flop it was going to be. But for the most part, everybody was very positive, and at least, let's put it this way: if they had their reservations, they were kind enough not to express them to me too openly or honest. I remember Arn Anderson said, "Look, kid, the one thing I've learned about this job is it's not like riding a bike. So if it takes a little bit, don't be hard on yourself. That happens to all of us." And then when I came back, he said, "Well, clearly I was wrong. It's like riding a bike to you. So there you have it." So, but again, as best I can recall, everything was pretty positive and pretty encouraging.
Shifting gears a bit here, when wrestling fans see you on TV now, you are typically wearing camouflage or some other sort of hunting apparel. For those unaware, you're an avid hunter. As a hunter myself, there is something very spiritual about sitting alone in silence for hours on end in the woods. How has hunting impacted your faith, and what do you say to those who question the morality of hunting?
I don't say anything to the folks that question the morality of it. It's sort of a fruitless conversation. I get a lot of people that obviously, I don't mean it disrespectfully, but obviously have never read the Bible when they talk about how it's not Christian. And I would encourage them just to read the the book of Leviticus, if they want to find out where God stands on where the animals fall in the whole food chain type thing, or open up the beginning of Genesis, it's pretty clear. But as far as it being a spiritual experience, I think that's something only that people that have done it can comprehend. You yourself just said that, and I honestly didn't know the first time that I went out, but there was just it's peaceful, it's serene. You have the opportunity to sit there and really take in the beauty of a day beginning or a day coming to an end, and it's an awesome experience. And so for me, and I'm guessing for you because you expressed it, that you can just feel it. There's sort of a oneness that you feel with nature and the creator of the universe when you sit there and just take the time. Honestly, I think a lot of it for me was because it was the polar opposite of the job I was doing for so many years. And it's a moment to stop and slow down and it's the epitome of the cliche slowing down and smelling the roses. You slow down and you take a lot in, and when you do that, it's a fascinating thing to do and an incredibly enjoyable thing to do.
Mike Yard?
Over the course of your wrestling career, you had so many great rivalries and matches with legends like The Undertaker, Triple H, Bret Hart, so many others. Looking back, though, if you had to pinpoint one guy as your greatest rival, as the guy who you most associate yourself with in terms of being their opponent, who would that be and why?
Well, that's anytime I do these interviews and somebody asks me to pin down something to one, that's always the hardest thing. I think when it comes to mentioning me or someone else and who you would directly associate it with, it's very hard not to say Brett and I, even though our angles from a pure television storyline standpoint weren't always the longest or this or that. There's clearly, as we all know, a huge, I guess, I don't know what you want to call it, reference when you think of Brett, you think of me. When you think of me, you think of Brett. It's hard not to. So I think that's one. And then beyond that, I feel like it's sort of in stages. I think it's hard not to think about Razor when you think about Razor or me and Razor. I think Jericho and I have something like that now to a point. And even though Taker and I, as you mentioned, even though there were not a huge amount of matches, the ones that we did have were so impactful that it's hard not to, hard not to say him too. So I don't know how well I could narrow it down to one, but I think it would probably have to be Brett and Shawn, clearly because we just had obviously so much history with each other.
BG?
Shawn, heading in or immediately following Montreal, did you have an idea of how historic and important that event would become? And do you ever wish that you could have had a WrestleMania rematch with Bret Hart?
Well, I think in regards to the impact, I don't think, and a great deal of it has to do with being younger and not, having the maturity or even the depth to grasp the impact that the WWE or your job and the WWE has on its audience. So from that standpoint, you knew it was going to be big, but I can't say in all honesty that I knew that it was something that would just be talked about until the end of time. On one hand, I think you sort of get it, but again, back to just how busy the job is, you're so sort of living in the moment and moment by moment that I think you have a tendency to not grasp the depth or severity of something you're doing. And in regards to, again, I'd love to, you always want to be great to be able to go back and change things and do things better and things of that nature, but that isn't a reality. And so I do my best not to dwell on those types of things. I'm incredibly thankful for the relationship that Brett and I have now, and I think that's played out in a way, again, not the greatest for everybody involved, but in the annals of a cool wrestling story, it's certainly one of them, especially with the great ending.
Well, it's WrestleMania season once again, and you've been dubbed Mr. WrestleMania. The biggest storyline this year is Roman Reigns' ascension to the top of the card. What kind of pressure will be on his shoulders in the main event if he makes it that far? And what are your thoughts on Reigns as a top star in the WWE moving forward?
Well, as far as him being top star moving forward, I have very little. I'll let all the, again, there's the business is littered with folks that love to give insights on that. I'm clearly not one of them. So I'm the guy that sits there and looks in the rearview mirror and very thankful for the stuff that I got to do. As far as the pressure, I think it's going to be tough. I mean, obviously WrestleMania is pressure filled anyway. It's even more pressure filled when you're going for the first time into what might be the main event, and if you're sort of being dubbed or people are seeing you as the next guy, all those things mount up and they're important, and you want to live up to them, and it's hard not, especially now. I would imagine, even again back in my day, it was the beginning of the internet, and the newsletters were still there, and so I mean there was certainly you hear all the other talk. I'd imagine now with, again, social media and all that stuff, I mean it's right there at your fingertips. I'd imagine it's even tougher. That I can't put myself in the position of those young guys, but I'm sure it's an unenviable position, especially when our line of work is very cynical, and a lot of it is driven by a great deal of cynicism and cruelty and meanness and stuff like that. And it's always easier to believe the negative stuff easier than it is the positive stuff. And the feel-good stories don't usually spend a lot of time on the front pages. So I would imagine that it's a pretty tough road to hoe for the guys nowadays. And that's just, again, sort of, along with the great notoriety, all the good stuff that comes with it, there's always some negative that comes with it, and that's just something you have to do your best to balance along the way.
Mike Yerrick?
One of the greatest and most emotional moments of your career was your final match at WrestleMania 26 against The Undertaker. When you came to the conclusion that you wanted to have your last match at WrestleMania 26, firstly, was it ultimately your decision to have that match against The Undertaker? And also, if so, why did you tab him as the guy that you wanted to go out against?
Well, there was never the sort of tabbing him as the guy. It was coming out of the first one. I think that was 25, and feeling so awful great about it. And as I mentioned in the book, on the way home, being at a place where if it were all to be over, I'd be wonderful with it. And that's when you realize that, okay, you're at that stage, and so it's time to give that some serious thought. So anyway, you go through that whole process, and you make that decision, and then it was just that and the combination of, at the same time, getting a call and saying, hey, what do you think of this idea? And from my standpoint, and again, it's where, rightly or wrongly, my faith, played a part in me making the decisions in my wrestling career. It just felt very right. And given everything that Mark and I have been through personally, professionally, and again, just the way, again, even though it wasn't a huge, long, drawn-out storyline to the degree that, say, a Jericho and I storyline was. It was still one that you felt, pretty impacted by it and felt that it was big. The duration and the length of it didn't give it justice for the impact that it had on me and I think the fans in general. And so it was just one of those things where when it all feels right, it can't be wrong. And so that's all those things falling into place is what made the decision easy for me to make.
PG?
Shawn, you helped lay the groundwork for the much-beloved Attitude Era by encouraging a more realistic product. And today, WWE is routinely criticized for being too scripted or safe in this PG era. Why do you think there is such a hesitancy or reluctancy to make things less scripted? And do you and Triple H ever talk about his vision for the future of WWE's product?
In regards to talking to Hunter, no. I'm the one guy that doesn't talk to him about the job. I just feel like that's the last thing he needs. It consumes his life far more than it does anybody else's. So I feel like the best way I can be a friend to him is to not talk about wrestling. And so from that standpoint, it's not a big topic with us. As far as being too scripted and things of that nature, I think it's a combination of both. And I've had people ask, I've been doing these interviews for quite some time, and they've asked me a similar question. And I feel like there have been times in the wrestling business, the Attitude Era was one, back in the 80s was another, and there'll be more to come, but to where it's a little bit of a, trying to figure it out stage. And I think where we're at is where one, again, sort of, let's call it an old guard, so to speak, is dealing with a new guard, and they're both trying to figure out the best way to work with each other. And I think that's taken some time. Again, again, the attitude stuff was being talked about, and we were getting tons of heat for it, and all the traditionalists, and again, I'm not trying to, again, speak ill of anybody, but there were a number of people, again, that found what we were saying in our ideas a slap in the face, a spit in the eye of tradition and stuff like that. And that was going on 2-3 years before it ever happened, before before someone finally said, you know what, let's try this. And so I think that's what's going on now. I think there's a figuring out stage. How do we, what's the best way? I think it deals with trust on both sides. I certainly sympathize with the talent now that says, gosh, you tell me to go out and, grab the brass ring, but then you get mad at me if I don't say this, that, and the other. So I understand that, and what it is it's a figuring out stage, and it's, to me, not going to be done until there a number of people that are willing to get in those areas where it's uncomfortable. And they're in my humble opinion, a guy that doesn't keep up, and clearly, even if I had good wrestling matches, there are enough people out there that don't feel like I have any good opinions about wrestling. My feeling is until you make a decision as one of the athletes, as one of the wrestlers, where it's more important to do the things that you feel are best for the business, if you truly have a vision for a way it ought to go, that you stick by it and you continue to do it no matter how unpopular it makes you. And that's, nowadays, I can see where that's tough. I mean, again, social media, everything else, you're going to have people telling you every step of the way. There's nothing more or less enjoyable than having your timeline filled with people saying horrific stuff about you. But sometimes that may be what it takes to create change. And I don't think a lot of people want to face that. It's more important to have those people thinking you're nifty. And that's a more comfortable and easier place to be.
Well, final round of questions here. One of the biggest stars in wrestling today is Daniel Bryan. You worked with Bryan as he was coming up through the business, and you have seen his rise to the top. What do you think makes Bryan such a special talent? And was there ever more planned between you and Bryan when you super kicked him at Hell in a Cell 2013?
There was not anything more planned. there was even less. It was just there was even less planned than we actually did. It was just the kick, and I was going home the next day. But I think what separates him is it's what people see in him. They see a real love, a real desire, a real passion for him, and it also doesn't hurt. Bye, everybody. Also doesn't hurt when you. And again, I don't mean it to take anything away from him. I'm not implying that at all. But it's much like Steve. It also does not hurt when you find a very simple, whether you want to call it a catchphrase or something that connects with people. The yes thing, it's easy, it's simple, and they connected with it, and so that doesn't hurt. But for everyone that will jump down my throat for trying to take something away from Dad, I'm not, because clearly the nifty little catchphrases and all that will not last long if you don't have the ability to back it up, and he clearly does. And I think they can see the genuine enjoyment that he has for the job, and I think that'll always separate again those long-standing guys from guys that are sort of flashes in the pan. They know when you're doing it just for the money, and they know when you're doing it. They can tell the difference if you're a guy that would do it for free. You guys, and I was once one of them. You guys are smart. You can see it in their eyes, and that makes a huge difference.
Mike Chiari?
With Sting recently joining WWE and entering an angle with Triple H, it looks like there's a good chance that fans are finally going to see a dream match that they probably never thought was going to happen. And you had so many awesome matches with all-time greats over the course of your career. But is there one dream match or dream rivalry that you never got to take part in that you wish would have come to fruition in one way or another?
Well, for me, it's the guys that I watched, and so I would have loved to have been in there with the likes of a Ricky Steamboat, Dick Murdoch, Harley Race, guys that I was watching when I was younger. To have had them, I think many years ago, I had to briefly get in the ring with Wahoo, but not the Shawn Michaels HBK version of Shawn Michaels. So for me, it's a great many of the guys that I watched growing up that I would have liked to have been in there with. Got to understand, I've far surpassed anything that I ever thought I'd accomplish. So certainly no complaints from my standpoint. But there are certainly guys that I think it would have been really cool to get in there and wrestle.
PG, final question?
Shawn, what do you view as your most important legacy or contribution to the business?
Well, to the business in general, I guess performance. I think again, there are phrases, stealing the show and stuff like that were never even, talked about many years ago. And I think now I will admit that I think there's some folks are going a little too far where they're basing everything on don't pay attention about whether I win or lose or this, that, and the other. Just pay attention to my performance. I think you can go too far one direction. Even the truth taken to extreme can be a bit dangerous. And so I think it's important to still strike a balance. But I guess my legacy would be performance or a smaller guy that proved that you can still do well. But those are things I learned a long time ago. My legacy is going to be determined between the WWE and the internet folks, and neither one of them are really dealing in hard and fast reality. So I've done what I've done. Very proud of it. Very thankful for it. And somebody else will make those decisions, and I'll be just fine living with them.
A huge thanks to our guest tonight, Shawn Michaels. Go out and get his book, Wrestling for My Life, The Legend, The Reality, and the Faith of a WWE Superstar. Please tell the fans where they can buy your book and support you, Shawn.
Well, the books are, my understanding, at any fine bookstore or Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. And in all the versions, the Kindle, iBook, eBooks, and audio. And obviously, I still do a hunting show on the Outdoor Channel. So, so by all means, I appreciate you guys having me and giving me the time.
A huge thanks to Shawn Michaels. Thanks again. Good luck with everything moving forward, sir.
Thank you very much, you guys.